Pervez, I'd like to start with you. A number of Pakistanis that one meets, and I have many Pakistani friends, get very infuriated by the generalizations about Pakistan. Whether it's from the West, whether it's from India, almost every day it seems like there's a doomsday bell being sounded about Pakistan imploding, this country in an existential crisis, and so on. Do Pakistanis look at their own country and actually feel it needs saving? Because before we get to how to save Pakistan or the 7 ways to save Pakistan, we must first agree that this is a country that needs saving. And I'm wondering if, as the foremost voice of public opinion in Pakistan, you believe that your country is in danger of imploding.
Well, there's always a measure of exaggeration whenever one reads newspapers or sees television and so forth. But one cannot take away the fact that Pakistan is in deep trouble. You can even see that how the cities look have changed. You see that there are concrete barriers, there are machine gun posts, that today lots of people just don't go out into the markets because they're afraid that a suicide bomber will come along. And there have been so many incidents in practically every city of the country. You've also seen the steady influx of religious radicalism, and it extends through the length and breadth of society. So indeed, I would say that discounting the exaggeration that exists, and there always will be, yet the fact is that, yes, Pakistan is in trouble. That trouble is of different kinds in different places. In Balochistan, it is a struggle for national liberation. These are people who feel that they have been exploited by the Punjabi ruling class. They feel that Balochistan, being where Pakistan gets all its minerals, its oil, its gas from, yet is the most underdeveloped part of the country. And so their anger is that they want control over these resources themselves. Well, that's part of the problem. But there are many dimensions to the problem, and I think perhaps the most frightening thing is the increase of religious radicalism. And we saw that, for example, in the murder of Salman Taseer, governor of Punjab, by his own bodyguard. Now, that man was a criminal. That man needs to be punished. And yet, the majority of people in Pakistan felt that, yes, he had done the right thing.
And the judge who delivered the death sentence in that verdict has had to leave the country.
The judge who delivered the death sentence to the killer has had to flee to Saudi Arabia. And so that is an indication of where things have come to.
Mani, you have always argued on this side that in many ways Indian imagination has not gotten far enough in Pakistan. I remember when Pakistan was ravaged by floods last year, you said this was a moment for Manmohan Singh to actually go into Pakistan and say, we are with you. The fact of the matter is that the Prime Minister stands in many ways a lonely figure on his desire for peace with Pakistan. You haven't agreed with the Prime Minister on many things, but I do think you agree with his position on Pakistan. But how is that possible when he finds himself so isolated within the government on his thinking towards Pakistan?
I think it's a matter of leadership. I don't think leaders are made by following those whom they're supposed to lead. They're supposed to lead those who are following them. And I think in India, we need to understand where exactly we stand with Pakistan. Pakistan is an irremovable geographical fact. It's also an irreversible historical fact. And from this country, India faces 2 sets of threats. On the one hand, Pakistan is a nuclear-armed state. On the other, there are terrorists who are both of a conventional nature and potentially of a nuclear nature. So what should India do? Should we cower in fear? Should we grimace in hatred? Or should we take 7 steps to save Pakistan and therefore save ourselves from Pakistan? And what I think we need to understand is that Pakistan is not a failed or a failing state. It may be a failing nation, But to protect that nation, the Pakistani state is interventionist in order to impose unity, to push forward uniformity, to impose discipline, and is therefore authoritarian. And in order to do all these things, the Pakistan state needs an other. That other is India. And as the other, there are at least 7 steps which I think we can and should take to not only contribute to saving Pakistan as a nation state, but also to protecting ourselves from whatever harmful effects are potentially there because of the fact that they are a nation state created by secession from India and because there is a certain element of hostility in Pakistan, which is nowhere near the extent of hostility that there is in India towards Pakistan.
Before we get to those 7 steps, Mani, let me put to you what many people in India say, which is why it's been so difficult for the Prime Minister to push ahead with his peace initiatives. Firstly, is it India's problem to save Pakistan?
Of course.
Why?
Because the consequences of a failing Pakistan would be a state that would attempt to attack the other in order to save its own nation. There is no advantage to be got in India through the disintegration of Pakistan. And what is more, I think Pakistan is very much like Belgium, a nation which, when it is at peace with its neighbors, spends all its time quarreling internally. But if there is ever an outside invasion of Pakistan, then just like the Belgians dissolved the argument between the Flamands and the Wallons and put up a much better job against the Germans than, say, the French did, in the same way, nothing would unite Pakistan more than an Indian invasion, and nothing keeps Pakistan together more than Indian hostility. What we need to do is to convert the fact of our being a hostile other into our becoming a friendly other, and the consequences of this would have a ripple effect right across Northwest subcontinent, and we really have a peaceful and prosperous subcontinent.
Pervez, can I ask you that when we look at the psychology of the India-Pakistan relationship, and I say this as a Punjabi whose family migrated from Pakistan to the Indian side during partition, and I know there are so many such stories. Do you believe that there is a kind of love-hate schizophrenia in the relationship that makes, very often like a bad, diseased relationship whose turbulence one can get addicted to, that somewhere that normalcy that Mani talks about, just that regularity of response doesn't exist with us? It's almost like everything is so operatic when it comes to India and Pakistan, whether it's the collapse or whether it's the jhappi puppy.
Well, absolutely, it's a crazy relationship. When you have Indians visiting Pakistan, they are welcomed as though they were, they were long-lost brothers, and they go to restaurants, the restaurant owner doesn't charge them. This is just incredible hospitality that they experience, and yet, day in, day out, you get hostility against India. Now, let me come back earlier to when you asked Mani Shankar, does India have a responsibility for moving towards peace towards Pakistan? And I say absolutely. Because India is, to a considerable measure, responsible for the state of affairs today as well. Let's take the nuclear explosion, first 1974, which then gets Pakistan onto the track of making nuclear weapons. Then comes 11th of May 1998. Well, it's probably not very well known here in India, but the fact is that Pakistan was thinking many times before it actually went ahead and tested its own nuclear weapons, because they didn't want to take the sanctions that were sure to come thereafter. So if it had not been for Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and if it had not been for George Fernandez, and if it had not been for Lal Krishna Advani, who said, now the strategic balance of power has shifted, Pakistan give up, I don't think Pakistan would have tested its own nuclear weapons. And then see what happened after that. Immediately you have Kargil. What is Kargil? A secret incursion of Pakistani irregulars, Northern Light Infantry, and they come across and they make life
But
hell
what would
for
have
you and for
happened
us.
to the underground peddlers of nuclear secrets like A.Q. Khan? Many Indians would have worried that if India, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, that many Indians would have worried that had we not gone ahead with our own nuclear program, Pakistan may not have tested overtly, but the A.Q. Khans of the world would have flourished.
Oh, let's go back a bit further into history, 1974. Until that time, Pakistan had not even begun its nuclear program. A.Q. Khan came because of the Indian nuclear test. So the nuclearization of South Asia, which then ultimately works out to the detriment of India, because now, look, nukes are an equalizer. The fact that India has much bigger army, air force, navy, and so forth doesn't matter anymore. You can think of all the Operation Cold Starts, but the fact is that these nukes now have given Pakistan a means by which to harbor jihadist groups within its own territory with the intent of attacking India. So you've lost out, we've lost out.
And everybody's lost out. Mani, as a government which almost fell on the basis of the civil nuclear deal, that is often tom-tommed by the UP, and it hasn't even been operationalized yet, ironically, as the singular achievement, or one of the centerpiece achievements of UPA-1. Do you believe that there's any going back, in a sense, from the nuclearization of South Asia?
Oh, yes.
How will it happen?
By resorting to what I regard as the greatest single achievement of UPA-1, which has persisted into UPA-2, which is the extraordinarily innovative idea put forward by Musharraf and Manmohan Singh together of a borderless Kashmir. Now, if we can have a Kashmir in which the line of actual control is rendered irrelevant, then why can't we have a borderless India-Pakistan subcontinent? If only we can begin with a decision in our minds that our response to Pakistan will be asymmetric, that we'll do what Gandhi taught us and what Jesus Christ taught the world much earlier, that we will turn the other cheek, we will attempt not to be imitative of whatever is wrong on the side of Pakistan, and non-reciprocity, that we will give more than we expect to get from them. If we have asymmetry and non-reciprocity, we can undertake a goodwill blitzkrieg as the alternative to either grimacing with hostility or cowering as cowards.
What should our response be, God forbid, if there were another significant terror attack that could be routed back to groups operating from Pakistan?
I think before that next terror attack takes place, the first step that India must take to save Pakistan, to save India, the first step that India must take is to set up an uninterrupted and uninterruptible dialogue, which means that no terrorist group can disrupt an ongoing conversation between India and Pakistan, which must be at least as frequent as between the Americans and the Vietnamese communists during the worst period of the Vietnam War. That's why I have been advocating that this uninterrupted and uninterruptible dialogue should take place at the Wagah-Atari border, so that neither government can say, don't do we won't talk. Put the table across the international border. The Indians will remain in India, the Pakistanis will remain in Pakistan. If you don't agree, well, we'll just separate and come back next Thursday. If we do agree, perhaps we'll have lunch together. And when we sign the agreement, Lahore is so close, we'll have a mujra. That's the way to move forward. Uninterrupted, uninterruptible.
When you see a public response like this, I think it's important to underline that there are many constituents for peace, yet they haven't been able to drive policy, institutionalized, and as you said, unshakable policy over the last few years. Pervez, I want to ask you within...
May I just answer why?
Because Sharma
It's
Sheikh
because
attempted what you said,
those
and it
who,
collapsed.
it's because those who think are sitting here and those who don't are sitting in power in Delhi.
Mani, you're really going to get into trouble one of these days. Okay. Pervez, is there a crisis within Pakistan over the fact that people like yourselves and so many other brave, outspoken, courageous Pakistanis who do go against the grain, who take positions, who want change for their country, change with India, are now finding themselves increasingly isolated in the way politics is unfolding. Let's take the recent Imran Khan rally in Lahore, which was not really expected, the turnout that it got, 160,000 people and more in Lahore. Are liberals of Pakistan, and I use that word carefully because I know many Pakistanis don't like that easy bracketing, are progressive voices in Pakistan finding themselves on the margins of what's happening?
Well, I'm afraid it's true. The liberals have been marginalized in Pakistan, and this is a consequence of the relentless Islamist trend that took over Pakistan after Ziaul Haq seized power in 1979. So what we've had is that our school books have been changed, but more important than that, the very idea of Pakistan was changed. I should say it changed not just in an instant, but it started changing after 1981. No longer was Pakistan to be a Muslim state, but it was to be an Islamic state. The two are completely different. A Muslim state is where the majority of people are Muslims. An Islamic state is a state which is governed by Islamic law. And so when Ziaul Haq took over, he put this deliberately, consciously into the curriculum, enforced it. And yes, at that time, there was resistance from within the people of Pakistan. They did not want being pushed into religious rituals. For example, the chairman of my department was required to lead the namaz. Well, it was a bit ridiculous because it just didn't work out after a little while. But now what's happened is that in my department, in other departments of my university and other universities, you have people praying on the walks over there. And slowly but surely, the Islamization of Pakistan has occurred. That is what has liberalized those of us who want a more pluralistic identity to Pakistan, who believe that the idea of Pakistan, that of the two-nation theory, has really worked its course, and now what we need is an idea of nationhood that has to be much more inclusive. Inclusive in the sense that it's got to include all peoples of all faiths, of all nationalities being given equal citizenship rights.
As a teacher, and you're a professor of physics at the Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad, you once actually spoke out against the burqa because you said as a teacher you wanted to connect with the faces of those that you were talking to. Is it difficult today to take that kind of position when there is that kind of radicalization seeping in to daily life?
Well, look, I teach my class. There are about, let's say, 40, 50 students, maybe 20, 25 girl students, and I can't see the faces of half of them. And that phases me out because as a teacher, I need to see what's on the student's face. Is she following what I'm teaching? Just those two eyes from behind are not good enough for me. I need to know more.
Mani, have we gotten over partition? Sometimes I feel Indians haven't.
Can I just supplement what Pervez said before I answer your question? Have we got over partition? No. I think a Tamil Brahmin refugee from Pakistan like myself, I have got over it, but I'm not sure the country has. But what I would like to supplement on, to the remarks of Pervez is that for 70 years, the Pakistan state has been attempting to promote disaffection towards India. And yet your personal experience, mine, even the experience that he talked about, has resulted in a total failure on the part of the state to persuade any very large number of Pakistanis that we really are the hostile element. For if we were regarded as the enemy, then why are we given the kind of reception that we get when we go to Pakistan? How is it that when an Indian test team, cricket test team, wins a match in Pakistan, the security is saying the winning team shouldn't take a lap, and the team says, no, we are going to run around, and the whole stadium stands up and gives a standing ovation. Absolutely. And then young people wander around the streets of Lahore with both an Indian and a Pakistan flag in their hands. I have, as a result of having lived in Pakistan 30 years ago and visited them 30 times in the last 30 years, I find that there is a huge constituency for peace and friendship with India. And that if we cater only to those who are hostile to India, naturally the periphery of those who are hostile will go on widening. But if we start catering towards the peace constituency in Pakistan, by, for example, having the kind of visa regime with Pakistan as we have with Nepal, if people can come freely into India, and if possibly Indians can go freely into Pakistan, if you have a completely free media exchange, I don't know why we feel threatened by importing Dawn newspaper from Pakistan. It's banned in India. Why is it that we are frightened of looking at Geo TV?
Or not showing each other's channels.
And not showing.
Yeah.
So if we can have a visa-free regime, if we can have media exchanges, including film exchanges, if we can have no restrictions on pilgrimages, if we can promote, be sensitive on trade issues, and have an open investment regime, then I think we will be establishing the kind of basis between India and Pakistan, on the basis of which, if India and Pakistan stand shoulder to shoulder on key international issues, you'll suddenly find such a change in the atmosphere that irrespective of Zia-ul Haq, we'll still be able to survive him. I think we have survived. Pakistan has survived Zia. And I think India has survived all the hostility that has come with Pakistan, with the separation of Pakistan. And what we need to do is a goodwill blitzkrieg by which we change perceptions on each side of the border of the other, as is already happening in Kashmir on the basis of the Musharraf-Manmohan formula.
Pervez, Hina Rabbani Khar said recently, it takes two to tango, and India and Pakistan are tangoing right now. Are we?
Not really. What Mani Shankar said, I can only add my fullest support to what you said. Let's take the first issue that you raised, and that was about the visa and the exchange program, and the fact that Pakistan and India are isolated from each other and that they don't have people who go across. Now look, it's very, very hard to, it's very seldom that you will find Pakistanis crossing into India or Indians crossing into Pakistan. There are only 2 flights a week from Lahore, only 2 flights a week from Karachi. Both of them are half empty. That means that you don't have, at least by air, more than maybe 400, 500 or 1,000 people going across from one country to the other, and maybe the same number by land. That is an absolute disgrace. What we should have is tens of thousands of people going from one to the other. Look at the trade between our countries. It's less than $1 billion a year. $1 billion is nothing. The trade with China, of India's trade with China, is $60 billion. The trade of Pakistan with China is of the order of $9 billion. And if you look at Pakistani exports into India, it is something like $230 million, $0.23 billion. Now, all that sort of thing absolutely has to be done. There's no, by the way, there's no breakthrough there that Hina Rabbani Khar is talking about. I mean, I wish it was true. It's not. Let's even take this most favored nation breakthrough.
Yeah.
Well, already there's backpedaling. We don't know actually if it's happening or not. So we've got to push for it. And unless we do it, the establishments in both countries, and I see particularly the problem being in Pakistan, they will want to keep our people separated. And the more we are separated, the less we'll understand each other. And it's crucial we get to know each other. Otherwise, we have this, otherwise Pakistan is losing its South Asian roots. It's being pushed. It's being Arabized, steadily, surely. You can see it, how people dress, how they speak. You know, even the word, when we part, is no longer Khuda Hafiz, it's Allah Hafiz. Why should it have changed? Why is Allah preferred to Khuda? They both mean God, right? Well, one is the Arab God, the God of Islam, and the other is a generic God. So we've been pushed in that direction. We need to fight it.
On the other hand, why do we have this silly visa regime? It's because of Ajmal Kasab. And Ajmal Kasab was the one Pakistani who didn't collect a visa to come in here. So when I was Consul General in Karachi, in the first 6 months, I issued more than 1 lakh visas in 6 months' time. And my last 10 visas, I got 10 journalists to come into my visa room and issue the visas themselves to see that it was genuinely true. If only governments will stop being stupid, and particularly our government, stop unnecessarily trying to prevent mothers and sisters and daughters and brothers, you'll find a huge change. Let me give you the very telling example of Saeed Naqvi's uncle, who was 13 years old at partition and therefore got a visceral objection to Pakistan, said he'd never go there. But when eventually he retired from his job in Raebareli College, the family said, there are so many of your relatives in Karachi, go and meet with them and see, it's a family thing, why do you want to keep fighting a historical wrong? So he went, he stayed 3 months, he came back, and Saeed and his family asked him, what was it like? He said, oh, it was fine except for one thing. And they said, what was wrong with Pakistan? He said, just too many Muslims. The thing is that Hindus and Pakistanis have occupied the subcontinent together in every village, in every street for centuries. And there are parts of India unaffected by the Punjab virus, like in Tamil Nadu or in Kerala, where they still live together all the time. In many ways, the Muslims are a kind of fifth caste. Now, if only we can understand that our security lies in Pakistanis getting to know us, and Pakistan will slowly realize that their security lies in Indians getting to know them. You reduce the quotient of hatred, reduce the quotient of non-knowingness, get from a situation where the French and the Germans kill each other regularly and in millions, and then suddenly one day wake up after the Second World War and say, why can't we be together? We have to get towards a South Asian Union. And to do that, we need to have intensive interpersonal relations, intermedia relations, intersporting relations, intercultural relations, and interpeople relations. So that can be done.
Pervez, one of the cynical things about the India-Pakistan dialogue that you sometimes hear from Indians is that we're not talking to the people with the real authority. Because till the Pakistani army mandates the civilian government to move in a certain direction, it would not happen. Some suggestions have been made that we should involve the army or the armies on both sides in direct talks. A lot of Pakistanis feel very uncomfortable. They feel it would undermine the fragile democratic process completely. Where do you weigh in on the army being part of the dialogue? Because it is, for example, part of the strategic dialogue with Washington. The Pakistani army and Washington do talk directly, but the Pakistani army and the Indian government don't talk directly.
Well, let's face the facts. It's the Pakistan army which runs Pakistan. It's not the civilian government. The Pakistan army makes decisions on nuclear weapons, relations with the United States, relations with India, what to do about Waziristan, whether to dispense with the Haqqani group or to fight them. All these issues are fundamentally made by the generals in the GHQ. And so if you do not talk to them, well, then who are you talking to? Now, I can understand the argument from the point of view that, okay, if you talk to the generals, then you undermine the authority of the civilian government. But when that civilian government acquires legitimacy, when it shows that it can actually run the affairs of the country and can in fact take a responsible position, it is at that time that, outside actors will begin speaking with it. Now, let me give you one example. The chairman, the head of the Nuclear Strategic Authority, Command Authority, was the president of Pakistan, Asif Ali Zardari. He decided that he didn't want this because he knew that the army really wanted to make all the key decisions regarding nuclear weapons. And so he said, I don't want it, give it to the prime minister. Now that is not what the president of a nuclear nation ought to be doing. So it's complicated, but I would say, yes, you do need to talk to the army.
On the other hand, I would argue, really the devil's case, that the only time India-Pakistan relations have moved forward is under military generals. The Indus Waters Treaty couldn't get signed for 13 years from 1947 to 1960. It was Field Marshal Ayub Khan who ensured that that particular movement could take place. Under Zia-ul-Haq, I was personally involved with Rajiv Gandhi in trying to see what could happen when Sundarji and Arun Singh, I'm naming them specifically, one is alive, had pushed the Indian army at the time of Operation Brass Tacks into a military confrontation with the Pakistanis who were alarmed whether this operation was actually a cover for a military attack on Pakistan. And the defusing took place entirely because of a personal set of conversations between Zia and Rajiv, which resulted in Zia in this atmosphere, flying into India just for an afternoon, just for lunch with Rajiv, and sorting out that problem. Under Pervez Musharraf, the man responsible for Kargil, we got the restraining influence in Pakistan to the way in which our government was mobilizing the entire army, like the Duke of York, who had 10,000 men. He marched them up the hill and he marched them down again. An asinine way of behaving. And then it was under General Pervez Musharraf, during the 3 golden years, 2004 to 2007, that we actually had the biggest movement on the back burner between India and Pakistan to sort out our problems. So much so that you ask any informed Pakistani civil servant or even politician, they'll tell you that Sar Creek, Siachen, Wular Barrage, these are all issues that are almost solved. And even on Kashmir. And Khurshid Kasuri told me, and he said it to me on screen, he said that Kayani was deeply involved in all this and had agreed that this should be done. So while the Pakistani army is terrible for the Pakistani people, I don't think we ought to be so scared of dealing with it.
It is terrible for the Pakistani people. There's no doubt that we spent the bulk of our life as a nation under military rule, and that's really been the reason why civilian governments have never picked up the strength to make peace with India, the strength, in fact, to have a Pakistan that Pakistanis today ought to be proud of.
Mani, very quickly, time for Manmohan Singh to go to Pakistan?
Of course, it was in 2004 that the time started, on the 22nd of May 2004. But I think what we need, unfortunately, heads of government visits are few and far between. Immediately, everything that was negotiated on the back channel in the period 2004-2007 should be taken up by special envoys on both sides, converted into agreements ready to be signed. With that ready, and Dr. Manmohan Singh goes across and signs it, the atmosphere will change immediately. Hina Rabani has personally thanked me for this expression, uninterrupted and uninterruptible. We can set that dialogue in motion. It'll be constructive, it'll change. And then there are 2 things that Pakistan and India must do internationally. One is we must take a joint initiative for global nuclear disarmament, joint. And secondly, India and Pakistan should work together. India and Pakistan should work together for the expansion of the UN Security Council instead of bickering this tutu meh with each other.
We've seen some cooperation there actually last week. We'll have to leave it there with the thought that I think as long as we have people like Pervez Hoodbhoy and Mani Shankar Aiyar on both sides of the border, and may their tribe increase, there is still hope for both our countries. Thank you very much.